we're pulling out the calculator, we're figuring out the numbers, what do they need to get on the final to pass, and then I get the top kids, how do I get an A? How do I get an A plus? And, they're doing a lot of the calculations on their own. So the things that make perfect sense to us and how to figure all of this out, it doesn't make sense to some of these kids who need our help at the end. So what do? How do we help them at the end? Well, I think with using the grades, as I talked about earlier, making them be a part of that process. Because when I'm doing all the work, they're sitting there spacing out. When they become part of the process, when they become part of the discussion, it does get better. It's easier for them to understand. So, I think for some of the kids who are struggling, the ones that I've got down in the Student Success Center right now, is organization. You look at their backpack and they've got papers all over the place. They haven't even put it together yet. They are going to study it the night before, and they're going to have absolutely no way of pulling it all together. Some of the kids get distracted by the computers and the TVs and all of that. Some of them have parents that will help them stay focused, and others have absolutely nobody that's going to pay any attention to them. So what are some of the strategies? Well, we've got some teachers here who have done a great job in getting these kids ready for finals, and I can see it year after year. Some of it is the structure, that even though the kids can't be organized as you are organized, you are helping them. And don't ever assume that anything that you think is just a given, everybody knows what they need to do. They don't. I had a kid last week, it was kind of funny, and he was sitting there trying to pass a class. My first kid ever, who had a 0 2 weeks ago in art and architecture, because he assumed because he was a senior he did not have to turn any of the work in. That was only freshmen who had to do that. And in his mind, as crazy as it sounds, it made perfect sense to him. And so we were sitting there talking about, he's like, well, what do I need to do to be able to pass this class? What do I need to do to pass that class? And then as we got to there, I said, okay, it's not about just passing. I don't want you to just do what you have to do. I want you to do what you need to do to be successful in each of these classes. You just have to do everything that you can do. And he asked for a pen and he wrote it down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why are you writing this down? To him, it was like, oh, I never thought about that. Okay, it was a given to me. It was something I would expect of the kids, but it wasn't a given to him. So some of the successful strategies that I have seen over the last few years is Mike Sullivan. He does the review for the chemistry final. And why is it successful? Well, he does it the day before the exam. So he goes in and he invites all the kids, doesn't matter who his teacher is, everybody can come in. And hopefully they've done their review, they have their cheat sheet or whatever it is that they do for that class. And what they do is they go into a room. And he isn't the teacher. He is just helping them. So he stands in the front and anybody can ask any question they want. And he will answer it. Which means the kids have to be organized enough when they come in. They have to know what they want to talk about, and they have to ask the question. And for some of those kids, they'd never heard it asked that way. They'd forgotten that that was even a topic in chemistry that year. And he just answers all of their questions until everybody has all of their questions answered and they're done. So it could be an hour, it could be 3 hours. And I think that's an amazing amount of a commitment on his part, to give up that day before, to just spend that time answering questions for kids. But I have had kids come in and they go, you know what, I didn't understand it that way. It made sense for the very first time that day. I did, someone else asked the question. I thought I knew what the answer was, and then I heard another answer, and I realized I was doing it wrong. So that was a great way. He wasn't doing the work. The kids were doing the work, but he was there to help them. Lingard does the same, very similar thing. All the kids in his class get a review sheet for the final, but he basically gives them the test. He changes the numbers, but it's the exact test. And so the kids have to go home and do it, and they work on it in class together. So the students know exactly what's on that test, and they work on it together as a group. And so they have to take responsibility. They have to do the work. It's not a teacher up there lecturing saying this is what you need to do. So I think as you get into the last 2 days is, like for me the last week, what can I do to get the kids to think of something that they could do that would help them be successful in studying for the finals. So that was what we've been doing in the Student Success Center the last couple of weeks, is how do you organize your material? Because a lot of the kids, freshmen, have no idea where to start. Okay, I've got a final. They don't know how much material is going to be covered, how many hours they have to study, how to put it together. Have you all told them that? Have they heard it? No, because until they do it themselves, a lot of them will not know what they need to do. So, I called my sister last night, and I said, this is what I'm talking about today. My sister has been a teacher. She's retired now, and she actually teaches teachers on brain learning in the classroom down in Phoenix. And she does it for the whole Phoenix School District. And so I said, what are some ideas that you have? What would you do to help kids study for finals that deal with the brain? And she said a couple of things. Just throw out a couple of ideas, and then we'll open it up to discussion. It's getting that brain working, getting them up moving. That you have to have a little bit of adrenaline going. If you get the kids with a little bit of adrenaline going, that brain will retain that information better. So if they're up moving around, if they're talking, if they're physically active, that brain is going to hold on to that information versus just sitting there listening to a lecture. But too much adrenaline, which are some of the kids that I get, it will wipe out all of their memory. So I think math and chemistry are probably two big ones. They get so worried about the test coming up, they can't hold on to anything. They worry about it. So any activities that you can do. I think one of the kids came in and said they were doing the Oregon Trail in one of their classes because it related to some of the material that they had in their history class. You could make up cards. You could either be the organizer or you could let them be the organizer. Put the kids together in groups. Have them think of name a topic that we talked about this year. And write it down. Make a question. And then you and your partner, you have to answer it. And then you have to talk about it. And then you have to send your card out. Everybody switches cards. So they have to come up with the topics, not you. See what they remember. Or you could be the organizer. You know what's on the test. So you put, on one color card, you put a question. On another card, you put the answer. On one color card, you put the vocab word. On another card, you put the definition. You hand it out to the kids. It's a quiet game. You pass it all around. Now the kids have to find the person. If you have a definition, there's the vocab word, here's the definition. Now the kids have got to find each other. Can't say a word, they just have to find each other. If you don't know where your partner is, then you just go stand next to the teacher and wait for that person to find you. That's actively making them think. You're not telling them, all right, here's what's the capital of Kansas? You're not telling them the answer. They have to find it out for themselves. So for those kids that are too embarrassed to ask, those kids that don't want to be involved in this process, they have to be. Because those kids that don't want to be involved in that process, they're sitting there quietly, not saying a word, not listening to anything you say the last 2 days. So how do you get those kids involved? They want to be involved. They just are afraid. They don't know how. And there's a whole lot of things going on at home that we often don't know about. And sometimes I don't even know about those until Kairos often brings it out. So those are some thoughts and ideas. And I know we have a lot of other great ideas that teachers have used here. You use the smart board so that they can look that up when they go home. And it gives them that information when they go home to do the work. So.
I do the same thing Lingard does too. I give my kid, and even though I have the upper echelon calculus guys, I give them a practice final, and it's basically the test. And say these are the concepts, and you just got to learn them. We'll go over them during repetition days, and I'm going to hold you accountable. So here's what you have to know. It's your responsibility to know it.
So, ideas from others?